Topics and of course our question of the day. Let's move now to the University of Cape Town. As we've been reporting this morning, all roads remain closed around the University of Cape Town as fire services personnel continue to monitor a runaway mountain fire which started yesterday morning on the slopes of Devil's Peak and subsequently spread to the university, causing great damage to buildings, including the library. Now, the historic Mostert mill in Mowbray and the tea house at the Rhodes Memorial were also destroyed. UCT spokesperson Elijah Moholola joins us now to tell us more about what is going on and talk about the extent of the damage at the institution. Elijah, good morning. Thanks so much for speaking to us. Welcome to Morning Live.
Good morning to you and also to the viewers, and thank you for having us during this really devastating moment for the university and for everyone associated with UCT.
Indeed, it really was gut-wrenching just watching those visuals, the videos that were sent by students, and also just the utter devastation that one saw there. But can you just give us a perspective from the university side? What is the latest in terms of the actual damage that has been sustained?
At this stage, we do not have a full extent or an indication of the full extent of the impact of the fire. We are still continuing to monitor both the fire as well as obviously the buildings on campus that are being affected. Around maybe mid-morning today, we expecting a number of our teams to conduct a bit of assessments to actually tell how much of an impact there has been, but we do know that a number of our buildings have unfortunately been affected. We do not know exactly or cannot really say authoritatively which and how many of those at this stage, but yes, we certainly have been affected. We certainly have had a few buildings, residences as well on campus affected by the fire.
And then, of course, the library, and I saw so many of my friends yesterday pretty concerned about the extent of the damage to the library and archives that may have gone up in flames there yesterday. Can you tell us a little bit more about that and whether you've been able to establish the extent to which some of the archives have been affected?
Yeah, I think that was really one of the saddest points around the fire, considering that the collection in the library is just invaluable, it's irreplaceable to a certain extent. So we have had teams working as well as hard as they could to try and bring the situation under control. We know that by late last evening, the fire was still continuing in parts of the library, but we also at this stage still do not have a full assessment or a full indication in terms of the damage. We are hoping that by as the day progresses, we will get that full indication from the teams that are on the scene working really hard to try and bring the situation under control. But yeah, it was really quite a devastating blow to just come to the realization that, you know, the library as one of the buildings that really you cannot really replace the material that is in there. And we hope as much as possible the damage has been contained, but inevitably there would be losses, you know, suffered around the area.
Elijah, also quite heartbreaking yesterday watching the students evacuate, and as you can imagine, some of them were a bit panicked as they saw the fire coming ever closer to their residences. So what are the interventions that have been put in place to accommodate the affected students, and how many of them are there?
So the immediate priority for UCT was to organize both transport, accommodation, as well as food for the affected student. We're talking about approximately 4,000 students that had to be evacuated. We utilized the university's bus system to transport them to 4 different evacuation locations. Once they were there, they were then taken to a number of hotels that have kindly come on board around the CBD or around Cape Town itself to accommodate a number of our students. As well, we've had, we are really grateful for the outpouring of support, offers, donations and all. We are working with a number of companies, including NGOs, Gift of the Givers, as well as your Pick and Pays, your McDonald's, etc., who really rallied behind this to make sure that all our students, as we speak, peak, all 4,000 of them had meals provided for them. And that's really remarkable considering the short time that we had to put everything in place. All Mutual also came on board. The public, members of the public are dropping off donations at the Pinelands offices of All Mutual, and they are being packaged there and distributed to students. So accommodation, there's been plans in place, meals as well. There's been plans in place for last evening and for this evening. But also what we did, we realized that the next immediate priorities were around what happens to the academic year, which now we can confirm classes have been suspended for today and tomorrow. Also as well, there was priority around the well-being of students, the impact psychologically on them. And we've put in place 2 resources to support students telephonically 24/7 as and when they require such counseling support.
So how many of the student residences have been affected, and what is the plan going forward with regard to those particular accommodation issues?
At this stage, we know that as much as most of the residences have been affected, have been evacuated rather, it's not all that have been directly impacted. A number of residences were really evacuated because of the smoke and the conditions around the area, making it impossible or unbearable for students to occupy those. So it's probably a small number that we will confirm later on of residences that were affected, but it in any case will have a big impact no matter how many residences were affected, because if you think of it, we are already at limited residence capacity because of COVID-19 compliance and protocols, such that we, for instance, where we have double room occupancy, usually we only have single room occupancy. So we're gonna need to find a way, we're gonna need to work out means, which we will, as soon as the executive gets to meet again, look at means of how do we then, considering the loss of space that we will experience as a result of the 1 or 2 residences that were affected, how do we then make sure that we cater for those students that will certainly be needing accommodation even post the fire after it had been contained?
Elijah, with regard to allaying the fears of parents whose children may be at UCT, those who may not be quite clear about what is going on, especially those from out of town, students from out of town, what is the message to parents at this stage, and how long before we can expect the institution to return to some normalcy at this stage?
So the assurance to parents and other stakeholders is that under the circumstances, difficult as it was, largely the situation was brought under control. Largely all the 4,000 students were looked after. Most of those would have gone into the accommodation arranged by students, by the university rather, and some would have arranged themselves, the students, those for instance from nearby areas, those who have family, relatives, etc., friends from nearby areas would have arranged their own accommodation. So that is the one thing, but also the assurance is that we realize the psychological impact of this incident on students, which is why we parked the academic program for the next 2 days. We are hoping that within these 2 days, today and tomorrow, we'll have a clearer sense, while at the same time the efforts to put the fire under control become even more successful. And in a sense, we will regroup around midday tomorrow and be able to communicate further what happens. But our hope is that we manage to put it under control at least within a day or 2, because as you can imagine, we've already lost time, teaching time due to COVID, and bringing it under control tomorrow might not necessarily mean classes get underway immediately. So there's a bit of time, academic teaching time to be lost, and we are hopeful that we do not really necessarily lose a lot. We were due to go on vacation next week Friday, so hopefully all works out such that we do not lose much time. But at the end of the day, we will prioritize the students' well-being. We will make sure that we align all the plans with what reasonably can offer the students, the parents, the reassurance that they will be supported through this period.
And just finally, Elijah, is there a hotline number that students or parents can call at this stage should they require any further clarity? For, as you said, this happened over the weekend, and maybe for students who decided to go off campus at the weekend, not quite sure about the situation coming back, is there any number that they can call just to get clarity?
We haven't put in place a specific contact number in place, but we are dealing with queries via various communication channels. First and easiest point would be either via your course convener or via, if you are a resident student, via your warden. That will be the first easier point. But also we are responding to queries via our social media platform. We've handled quite a number of queries there, just sharing information. And we are putting information proactively via our social media, Twitter, Facebook. We are putting proactively all the updates. As well, importantly, the website, the UCT websites get updated. When you get on the homepage, you will get the latest update as it stands.
Well, thank you so much for speaking to us this morning. And that, of course, UCT spokesperson Elijah Moholola telling us what the latest is. Still too early to assess the extent of the damage that has been visited on the University of Cape Town. But, of course, 4,000 odd students vacated, and they are being taken care of at various hotels and other institutions in the Cape Town CBD, and organizations such as, he said, Gift of the Givers and McDonald's, Pick and Pay, others rallying behind the institution and making sure that the students are fed. So for the following 2 days, no classes at UCT, and we'll pick up at a later stage as to the extent of the damage and, of course, also when the academic program will resume at UCT.